All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm Nikki with Out of the Class, and we also have Kat here with Out of the Class. We are almost at the end of our free webinar series, and of course, we save the best for last. And so we are excited tonight to have Dr. Katherine Kirkinis with us to go over a psychologist's point of view during your career change. So you can go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, again.
Well, thank you so much, Nikki and Kat. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here with you. And sorry, I'm having a technical moment. Here we go. So I'm a vocational psychologist, which means I'm just a regular psychologist, but I specialize in issues related to work stuff and related to mental health issues around career, right? So I was thinking today, actually, what could be fun is if we make it a little bit interactive and we use the chat a little bit. So one of the first questions that I wanted to pose to all of you was, I think a lot of people don't realize that mental health and career are, completely intertwined. And of course, I think a lot of the reason that you all are here today is because you're wanting to make a career change. So just to sort of start to get the conversation going while I talk to you, if you wouldn't mind just typing into the chat, just some symptoms that you think might come up from being in a career that's misaligned to you and your personality. So these could be symptoms that you've experienced before yourself, or it could be symptoms that, you've heard a friend experience, something like that. So if you guys want to just start popping some words in there, I think that would be a great place to start. Yeah, low energy, absolutely. Burnout, yeah. Lack of motivation. Yeah, so a lot of the ones that you guys are saying right now are actually, they could be aligned with symptoms of depression, right? Anxiety, mental exhaustion, right? I would say depression and anxiety are probably the two most frequent symptoms that we see in the clients that we get to our practice. So our practice is completely filled with clients who are really experiencing so much distress at work, and because they're in a career that's not aligned to what they want to do, that they're coming to us to figure out, what the heck should I be doing? Yes, being on meds, that's another one. We get a lot of clients that are like, oh yeah, I can't do my job without, my prescription for Xanax. I can't give a presentation unless, I'm fully medicated, which, from my point of view is like, hey, okay, that seems like maybe that's not the right job for you. But I think that that's one of the main theses that I wanted to share with you, is that I don't think a lot of people realize how intertwined mental health and career are, and how bad it can be for your mental health to be in a career that's not aligned with your personality, with your strengths, with your interests. And the image that I had shared before, which I can pop up again if you guys want to see, that you do spend a third of your life at work. So work is a really big part of your life. Let me see if I can share it again for you. Let's see. So when I look at this graphic, this used to be on our website because I thought it was so important, but all this red stuff is just like this half of your life we can just sort of ignore, because that's all eating, sleeping, whatever. And you can also ignore this childhood piece. But so really you just have this little area here to work with, right? And this tiny green part is your career, right? So I like to share that image with people because I think it shows how important this issue really is. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't pay very close attention to their career. They kind of stay in this career like, it sucks, I hate it, it makes me depressed. But they have this kind of mentality like, oh, everyone hates their job, right? Like, or the other common phrase, I think, from like an older generation is like, it's called work for a reason, right? It's not supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be enjoyable. But as a vocational psychologist who really believes in the connection between mental health and work, like obviously, that's the crux of my clinical work and research. And I really believe the opposite, that it is really important to enjoy your work. So let's see. People end up in careers that they don't like all the time, though, right? And that's why we have a thriving business, is because all these people end up in the wrong career and they're really unhappy, and then they come to us. So if you could pop into the chat some reasons that you think that people end up in the wrong career. Like, how does that happen for people? Could be your own experience or someone else's. Family expectations, yeah. Convenience, absolutely. Money, being young, not knowing what to do. Yeah. Pressure, yeah, that's another big one. Financial stability and pressure, I think, are really big ones. So in terms of our clientele that we see, I think parental pressure, like right after college is, or during college as well, or like force. So we've heard clients say like, oh, my parents said they wouldn't pay for college unless I studied a certain thing, right? It can also be like cultural reasons with your family. So there's some cultures that only really value certain types of jobs like engineering, lawyer, doctor, business. And they're like, okay, these are your options. You have these 4 options. So figure out which one fits for you. That's another really common one. Also other cultures like, you know, I don't think there's like a particular country that this goes with, but I think I see a lot of men that were raised like, oh, I can only do finance or tech, like those are my only options. Some women, you know, get kind of societal pressure around gender, like, oh, I should be a teacher or a social worker, something nurturing, and they don't really consider options in STEM or options in finance for themselves. So I think that that's another really important piece. A lot of what you guys answered in the chat is one of the other reasons, which is focusing on just one variable, right? So I see that a lot with our clients, which is people choosing a career based on one variable that's important to them, like money. I want to be high earning, so I'm going to choose this job, right? Or, you know, convenience, like, you know, it's really giving me a lot of anxiety to job search, so I'm just going to take this first job that was offered to me, right? Things like that. The other thing that can happen is this idea of like career security, right? So there's this myth going around that there's certain jobs that are more secure than other jobs, right? So that's another reason that people choose certain careers. Like I hear a lot, oh, accounting, I chose accounting, or my parents made me choose accounting because, you know, it was super secure and I knew that I was gonna always have a job. But I try to challenge that with clients too, because, you know, there's no such thing really as job security. Like anyone can lose their job, as we saw in the, you know, COVID-19 pandemic. This idea that there's some jobs that are more secure than other jobs. I think teaching is another one that people are like, people always need teachers, so it's secure. But, you know, you can lose your job, right? I think another really common one is following in a parent or other type of mentor's footsteps. Like, well, my mom was a teacher and my grandmother was a teacher, so yeah, you know, that just makes sense to me. I'm going to be a teacher, right? So all of that considered, what goes into making what we call a holistic career decision, right? So there's a lot of different variables to consider. You guys named a few of them, but I think this is where people start to get stuck in terms of what else is important to consider and when making a career change. So you guys have any ideas? Maybe you can pop some into the chat, like what other things in addition to what you've already mentioned do you think is important to consider or important for you to consider at this point in your life? Interests, yeah. Passion. The ability to be able to train to get into that new career. Values, I love to see that one. Personality, exactly. Great. Yeah, so you guys are on the right track. So there's a lot of the sort of thesis that I like to make with this piece is that there's a lot of variables that go into it. Sustainability for your emotional and physical health. Yeah, that's a really, really good one. So I'm going to show you just an image to kind of get you in the mood, but there's a lot of other variables I'm going to talk about, but I just want to share this image with you first. So this lovely image, my brother's ex-girlfriend made this for me. I thought it was really nice. But these are just as many variables as we could kind of fit on one graphic. I'm going to go through all of them, but I'll just sort of go through each of these for you. And if you have questions, you can kind of pop them in the chat and I'll answer them. But personality is a really big issue, right? So personality is complex. So at Wanderlust, we do personality testing with our clients to figure out, different aspects of someone's personality. Most simply, like introvert, extrovert, right? If you just think about that as like a simplification of personality, we'll get someone really introverted who's been working in sales and doesn't understand why they're so tired and why they hate their job so much. They're like, it's so weird. I like people. I don't understand, what's going on here. And we'll look at their personality and be like, oh, well, I mean, you like people, sure, but like you can't be on the phone all day. That's gonna actually like kill you, There's other aspects of your personality that we can see from personality testing, which is about like motivation, like what motivates you to work. So we can actually tell from personality tests, like what that aspect is that actually would get you out of bed in the morning and like get up and go do something, which I think when you ask someone that directly, like, hey, like what motivates you? Or, what do you find motivating? I think a lot of people are like, I don't know. I have a hard time, saying what that is. But I think once you give language to people about what that is, that's when they are like, ah, yes, that's exactly what it is. Right. So for me and my personality, the sort of phrase is to empower people, to empower other people, which makes a lot of sense for why I like my job, because that's all it is it's empowering individuals to get the life that they want. Right. Some of you mentioned effort, which is like, okay, how much work is this going to take? Right. Like I'm, this age, I have this many kids, like I'm not going to get another full degree. Like I need something that I can do quickly, cost effectively. That's not going to, take many, many years of my life. One of you mentioned interests. Absolutely. Like, do I find this interesting? And I think a better phrase about interests, because I think it's hard to say, okay, what are you interested in? Well, I'm interested in a lot of things. Or someone else might say, I don't know, I'm like not interested in a lot of things. So we like to rephrase that as excitement. What do you find exciting? What excites you rather than what interests you? And I think that helps people get a more clear vision of some of those ideas. Values, someone mentioned values, and this one's huge. So this is a huge piece that a lot of vocational psychologists miss, or at least in the past they have missed. This is sort of a newer area. Most psychologists in the past really just looked at interests and personality, and that's it, which is kind of wild now that we're looking at this whole graphic. But values, like what do I care about? Like what matters most to me, which is really different for everyone. So for some clients, their value is like, I want to work remotely. Like that's what matters a lot to me. That's in my top 5. So we'll do like an assessment about values where people actually have to look at all these different values and they're on cards, and you have to actually like move the cards into different categories. Like, okay, this is the stuff that I value the most. And then people really struggle because they're like, I can only have 5 things in this category. Like I have to give up one. And it's a really interesting psychological exercise for people. Examples of other values are like, I want to do something good for the world. I want something high earning. That's an absolutely okay value. Another really cool one is like, I don't want to climb a corporate ladder. Like I kind of want to exit that rat race thing. So there's a whole bunch of different ones that you can look at, and I can send you some resources, or we can put them in the notes at the end, but just some lists of career values that can be really helpful for people to just sort of start to circle like, okay, I think like these would be my top 5. Life context is about like where you are in your life. Like I mentioned before, like if you have kids, if you want kids, if you want to move to a new country, like what other types of life goals that you have. Education and training is what it sounds like. Did you go to college? What did you major in? Do you have the ability to take on more education? Do you have the financial ability? Do you have the effort ability to do that? Gender boundaries, we talked a little bit about. This is kind of like more of an old-fashioned career theory, but I think a lot of it still holds true today, just that there are certain men out there that are like, yeah, like I don't want to be a kindergarten teacher because that is too feminine, right? Or women out there who are like, yeah, I don't want to work in construction because it feels too outside of my gender comfort zone. I'm hopeful that this is becoming less of an issue now, but I think it does still apply, especially in certain cultures. Skills, I think, is an obvious piece, and your work history thus far, right? Like, what do you actually know how to do, and what has your experience been? This one, though, I think is really flexible, and I think this is a big place where people get stuck in terms of career change thinking. They think like, okay, well, since I've only been a teacher, like, what the hell else am I gonna do? Like, this is all the skills and experience that I have, right? But I like to remind clients that like skills are learned. So the skills that you have, like, that doesn't mean those are the only skills that you'll ever have. You can absolutely learn new skills. And there's so many transferable skills. I know that that's like a super cliched, overused word, but Julia will remember we had a client recently, a teacher, I think she was like a fifth grade teacher who wanted to transition into HR. She did our assessment with us. She decided, I really want to do something in HR. I really want to do something in advocating for employees and advocating for their rights. That was what really excited her. She had this fifth grade teacher resume for a bunch of years, and we're like, okay, like, how are we going to transition this person? And we have a really wonderful resume writing team, and part of the experience of resume writing is talking to a person and trying to pull out like, okay, I know what you want, I know what you did, like, let's pull out the stuff that applies to what you want to do. And it turns out that she had done a ton of experience working with like special needs kids and sort of identifying areas that they needed advocacy in, advocating for, I think they're called like IEPs and things like that. So we were able to actually transition her experience and talk about it just as people, not working with children, but her ability to advocate for people's rights, to advocate for disabilities rights, and transition all of that into some sort of a specialty. Like, she knew a ton about disability stuff. So we're like, okay, just take like a weekend course on like the ADA, which is, about advocating for disability rights in the workplace. And we were able to transition and write about her in a way that was really high level, where it wasn't super obvious that she was doing it with fifth graders before, which was really cool. Goals. So this is different for everyone. It's really personalized. But what do you want in the future? Is it a financial goal? Is it a place that you want to live? Is it a position that you'd like to hold? And prestige. I think this is a huge one for a lot of people. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people. Prestige meaning like, for some people, it really matters. Like, at one point in my life, it really mattered that I would get a PhD and not be master's level for, that was a real vanity issue. And I wish I had my own vocational psychologist to work with at that point. But for some people, it matters. They want to work at a brand name. They want to hold a certain title. Fine, and I think that's another piece of our work, is not judging people for the different values that they have, right? And allowing people to be themselves. And if they want to make a lot of money and they want to have a really prestigious position, that's totally fine. And we support people through that. But we do sort of question people like, okay, let's just like go a little bit deeper. Like, what is this about? Like, why is this important to you? And that's one thing that you can kind of do for yourself, is just keep asking why. And you can kind of journal it out if you'd like to sort of get to that root reason. For example, we had like this really high level finance guy who was like making a ton of money and wanted to make more money. And I'm like, okay, but why? And he's like, yeah, because I want to be financially stable. And I'm like, okay, but why? And he's like, yeah, because I have a family and like I need to support them. And I'm like, okay, but why? And he's like, well, and we got all the way down to the story where, he was a kid working as a doorman in New York City and watching these fancy guys go in and someone, I don't know, put a cigarette out on him or near him or something like this. And that was like his deeper reasoning of just wanting to feel better about himself. And at the end of the day, that was what was important to him. So we just go with that. So any questions at this point? I know I just gave you a slew of variables. I have a few more to add, but if you have any questions, you can pop it into the chat and I'd be happy to answer. Let's see, what other things? Are there any? Yes. So we can share some resources with you for some free personality tests. That was the question. Are there any free personality tests? Yeah, there's a really great website that we can share with you that essentially takes you through the same process that we take clients through, and you can do it yourself. So it's like a DIY version. And it's a little overwhelming because there's so many different variables to consider, but you're welcome to take a look at it. Sometimes when I send it to people, they're like, yeah, I'm not doing this by myself. And then they want to get some support to do it, but I'd be happy to share that with you. A few other things, just other variables that I wanted to mention that are really important. One of them is mental health, right? So another test that we put into our battery is just assessing people's mental health on different variables. And this one I think is really important and often overlooked because I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, for example, we had a woman who was a really good writer. She wanted to be a writer. She had great experience being a writer, but had really debilitating anxiety. So she could not handle tight deadlines. She could not handle high pressure situations. She would just sort of fall apart and panic. And even though she was on lots of medication, like kind of in therapy, it was just really hard for her, right? So it was a really difficult journey for her to come to like, okay, like maybe this type of journalism isn't for me. And that's not to say if you have anxiety or if you have a mental health issue that you can't overcome it and that you can't work a job that sort of inspires some of those symptoms. However, like it might be an easier choice for you to choose something that doesn't spark those symptoms as intensely, right? So for her, she ended up choosing copywriting and copy editing as well, like doing both of those things, which for her was a way to be involved in writing that just didn't have that high pressure situation of like, we need 7,000 words by tomorrow at midnight situation that was really freaking her out, right? And similarly, I wanted to mention disabilities, right? So again, like just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you can't do certain types of jobs, but it does mean that there are things that might be harder for you. So it's just something to take into consideration. Like really classic examples are like ADHD. Some people have ADHD and there are certain jobs that just don't mesh super well with that. Right. I had a client today who I talked to who's doing this super hyper focused computer job with like a lot of detail orientation and a lot of logistics, and she hates it, right? She wants to take a break. She wants to get away from her computer. Like she can do it, she does it, but it's not like the best fit for her. It also reminds me of another client I had who was dyslexic, who really, really wanted to work in tech. He really, really wanted to be a coder. But he was really having a hard time with it because of his dyslexia. He was never getting the code right. Things were always breaking. It was super, super frustrating for him, and after doing some counseling with us, he ended up going into UX, UI design, which is a lot less coding heavy and a lot more visual in the ways that were suited to his strengths, right? Did I say salary? I don't think so. Salary is another big one. Salary is really important to a lot of people, right? I think to most people. I think this is when we start talking about boundaries, right? So these are all the variables that go into making a career decision, which are great. Like there's a million to consider, which is why I think it makes people's heads explode. But then the next level is we also have to consider boundaries, right? Well, I need to earn this much in order to take care of my family comfortably, right? Another boundary is location. My community's here. I don't want to move, right? Um, Visas, I think, are another boundary for international clients. I have a certain type of visa. I have to comply with those regulations, right? Willingness to re-educate. Hey, listen, I don't have money to re-educate. I don't have time for that. Like, I need something fast and I need to use my current resume, right? I have a health issue. I need to have certain kinds of benefits, right? So this is like when our job starts to get really, really hard, right? So, you asked about free tests, and I think that there are some really great free tests out there, but it starts to get layered and complicated, which is why I think it's nice sometimes to work with someone, whether it's a coach or a friend or just someone to help you organize all of this information, because it's a whole lot of information that goes into this one decision. Okay. Let me just check to see if there's any questions. Okay. Tina, I've worked so hard to get to the top of the pay scale, and I'm finding jobs. I'm a little dyslexic, so this is slow. I'm finding jobs that I think I would love, but it's half of what I make. Is it worth taking the pay cut? It's a really good question. I think it depends on you and your situation, right? Some people, I think psychologically, they have trouble with the pay cut. They're just like, oh, I'd be making half of what I was making. But some people, depending on their situation, they might have a really high earning partner, right? So I've had conversations with people like, yeah, but like, you have a really high earning partner. So like, if we sit out and like spreadsheet your life and look at exactly how much you need to be comfortable, like how much does that $50,000 matter? Or how much does that, whatever amount matter, right? So for a lot of people, taking the cut is just like it just like hurts their soul. But so I often tell people to do that, to sort of like spreadsheet your life, think about like what you really, really need to be comfortable. And, it's so interesting actually when people actually do that exercise and like spreadsheet exactly how much their life costs. I have so many clients that are like, oh wow, my life actually like isn't that expensive. But living in New York or living in wherever they're living or being surrounded by the people that they're surrounded by, they have this like they have these numbers in their head, like I want to make $200,000 a year. And I love asking people, and I used to ask the same question to my eating disorder clients who had like a number on the scale. I'd be like, oh, where does that number come from? And it was so interesting. Like most people have some kind of a story that's quite arbitrary, like where that number comes from. Oh, that's how much so-and-so made in Friends, or that's how much I asked my dad once when I was a kid how much he made, and that's what he said, right? So I think and this is another huge thing that we do at Wanderlust, is we try to make data-driven decisions, not decisions just based on like, I don't know, I just kind of like felt like it, right? Because that's usually what got us into a bad situation to start, right? So, okay, my next topic is, why do people stay stuck in a career, right? So maybe you guys can pop in the chat. Why did you get stuck, or what sort of happened in your story, or why do you think people get stuck and they don't make a change? Because that I see a lot. Like I'll get clients and they're like, I've been in this job that sucks for 10 years. And I'm like, oh, that's a really long time. All right, let's see. Talia, I've applied to 180 jobs this year. Oop, we're getting a lot. Okay. A pattern I've noticed is that either one gets ghosted or get an interview and told, because of the level of my education, I have a master's degree, I would not be a good candidate because they're looking for someone with an associate's or bachelor's level degree. So you get rejected because you're overqualified. I guess my question is it best to remove the fact that I have a master's degree and just write that I have a bachelor's degree? That's a really good question. So I have two feedbacks for you. 180 jobs is a lot of jobs to apply to in 12 months. So one of my curiosities about that would be like, okay, like what were the quality of these applications, right? Because I think to apply to that many jobs, you have to be doing it pretty like efficiently and pretty quickly. So I'm wondering like, oh, were these cover letters that were like kind of canned, or were you just sort of like clicking on LinkedIn, like click apply, and there's like a whole, this is like a different topic for a different day, but there's a whole like job search methodology that's really effective. And I'd be happy to do that talk a different day. Because I think what a lot of people do is they do like the lowest effort application possible because they think like, oh, like quantity is better than quality. But in fact, it's, the opposite, which, maybe you've heard before. But like higher quality, like well-researched applications are the ones that are going to do the best, plus additional research to follow up with whoever that person is that you've applied to. So if you apply to a job at this place, doing that extra research, well, let me see if I can figure out who my boss would be at that organization. Let me see if I can find their email address. Let me see if I can send them a direct email that says, hey, I applied to this job online. I just wanted to tap you again. So that's one piece of advice. And then the second one is, yeah, if people keep giving you feedback that you're overqualified, yeah, why not? Why not experiment with taking that off and see if that helps, right? I think that there's nothing wrong with being creative with your resume. If you feel like you're running into the same feedback over and over again, like absolutely, I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that. I certainly did that when I was a PhD student. I took that off because I wanted to work at this really cool bakery. And I thought that they would not hire me if they knew I was getting a PhD. So I definitely took that off and did not mention it. And I got the offer, which was nice. Okay, let's see if I can answer some more of these questions. I'm so close to retirement, just holding on to get that retirement money that you can't live on. Oh, okay. I think you're answering my question of why people get stuck. Great. People get stuck because they're scared or feel guilty of leaving, that they're comfortable and secure. I think that's such a good one, such a common one that we see. Guilty of leaving. This one's kind of new, but 2 people have said that now, which I think is really interesting. Let's see. Oops. All right. I didn't know what to do in college, so I took a career interest survey and teaching came up at the top of the list, so I went for it. And I've enjoyed it overall. Even now, 13 years later, I'm looking into a transition. Every career interest survey I take now still says teaching is the recommendation. Am I just taking the wrong career interest surveys? I do not know what else there is out there. I'm ready to move on. That's such a good question. So yeah, so I think that this is the other reason that doing tests on your own is a little bit difficult, because it's like you're interpreting them very literally, right? But if we see teaching come up over and over again, it might just mean that like, yeah, teaching was a good fit for you at one point in your life, but as we talked about, there's so many other variables, right? So there's so many reasons why teaching's not a good fit for you anymore, even though it's aligned with your interests. So it sounds like you've been taking one test, which is a career interest survey, which is great. That's one variable from our list. Obviously, like as we've discussed, career decision-making is way more complex than just one test, which is why we give people lots of tests to measure all these different variables. So yeah, if you just go with one test, it's going to give you one answer, and that's not nearly as complex as the question is. But you could interpret it in a different way, like, okay, like there are things I like about teaching. Like I like one-on-one helping positions. I like sharing information and making it digestible for people, but that could translate into a lot of different types of jobs, right? Like think about like corporate training, right? That's a teaching like job at the corporate level, right? You could think about consulting, like educational consulting or organizational consulting. There's a lot of like teaching elements there, but it's not, straight up classroom teaching. Okay, I think I can get to both these. I didn't think I could do anything else. I believe I can only teach, not valuing myself to step out, not having courage. Yeah. I've done all sorts of things from simple to very detailed cover letters. Oh, you're responding to me. Okay. I've even physically stopped in locations to see if they were hiring. I will take off my master's degree to see what happens. I've already removed my LMFT from the resume. Cool. Yeah. And we can talk more, Talia, if you have like additional questions. That's one thing that we also offer is if you go to our website, you can set up a free call with us and we can talk more about your individual situation. Okay. So yeah, just to review just from some of my notes, like, yeah, like I think people get stuck because of the feasibility piece. Like it's too difficult to change. It's too expensive to change. It's too time consuming. People have all these like kind of like, we call them dysfunctional beliefs, but these beliefs about why it's impossible. And it doesn't have to be like that. It can be those things. It can be expensive and difficult and time consuming to make a career change, but it absolutely doesn't have to be. If that's your boundary, or if those are your boundaries, we can absolutely help you figure out something within those boundaries. And I think even if you're doing this on your own, like you have to try to challenge some of those beliefs about yourself, and not about yourself, but about the world in general. And one thing that might be helpful is on our Instagram, we've been doing this new thing where we're sharing career transition stories. So we have different stories popping up of people who've made career changes in a whole bunch of different ways. And I think just expanding yourself in that way and seeing what other people have done, how they've done it, and realizing, okay, not everyone goes back to school and gets a whole different degree. Some people just take some certifications and nudge themselves in a new direction rather than doing like a whole career change. So we talk about that a lot. Like there's career pivots, which is using your existing resume and just sort of pivoting in a different direction. And then, yeah, some people do choose to do career changes and re-educate. And both of those are possible for you. And I think the other thing that freaks people out is that they know that they don't like what they're doing, but they have no idea what they'd rather be doing. And then they get really overwhelmed because there's so many variables. And I think people stay stuck for that reason, because they're just like, like, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to be frozen and I'm going to stay here for a while. And I think that's the most common thing that I see. So we have a few minutes left. So I have other things that I could talk about, but I also just wanted to stop and pause and check in to see if other people had other questions that they were hoping to have answered today. Since it's a small group, I feel like I can attend to some of those. And if not, I can tell you, I'll just move on to the end of my spiel, which is, what can you do about it, right? So we've talked about, okay, these are all the things that go into making a career decision. What can I do about it, right? So as I mentioned, we have career assessment, which is, what are some small steps we can say? Yay, yeah, we did it. So career assessment is obviously like a great option. That's like all we do all day. But if that's not for you, some things that you could do on your own is sort of checking back with that list of variables. Let me share this little picture with you, which will help. Okay, cool. Share screen. Here we go. You can kind of go through some of these variables on your own and think about like how these are impacting you. Ooh, I almost forgot my most important thing. So thinking about all these variables, taking different tests that you can find online, I think is helpful, but absolutely do not make decisions from just one or two tests. I think that's where people kind of go wrong. I think you really have to consider this whole range of things in order to make a holistic decision. So that's my big caution. Like if you're doing it yourself, don't just pick one or two or three things, because I think that's going to be bad. So let's not do that. But the thing that I wanted to tell you that I forgot to tell you is that there's three major areas or three major reasons that people stay stuck in terms of making a career decision. And this is based on vocational psychology research. So the first piece is lack of information about the self, right? So people, surprisingly, like a lot of people just don't know themselves that well, right? If you ask them, okay, like what are you interested in? What excites you? And they're like, yeah, I don't know, right? So that's one thing we try to solve with career assessment is, okay, who are you? What matters to you? What drives you to do things, right? So information about the self, um, information about the world of work. This is another reason that people stay stuck is like, how am I supposed to know I want to do educational consulting if I've never heard of that before? So that's something that we try to alleviate with our testing, as well as we actually pick out specific careers for people. A lot of times they've never heard of them before. So we're trying to expand people's horizons. But you can also do this yourself just through internet research. I think YouTube's a really interesting resource as well. There's like a million people with like a day in the life of a dentist, and then, you know, they're doing their whole day. Like you can get a lot of information from just sort of going into a YouTube hole. Informational interviews, talking to friends. Hey, has anyone ever, like, I remember a point in my life where I didn't know what a consultant was. I was like, what is this weird job that everyone does? What is consulting? You know, but sort of following those sort of pings, right? And doing some research. And then the third, this is the most important piece of my whole talk. The third piece that keeps people stuck is the dysfunctional beliefs that they have about work, right? So the most important step that you can do is start to identify what those beliefs are that you have and challenge them, right? So those beliefs could be anything from, it's not possible for me to make a change, right? So that could keep you stuck. And challenging that would be like, okay, well, let me look for stories of people who have made a change, or let me do a free call with Julia at Wanderlust to sort of ask, hey, can you tell me some stories about people like me who've made a change? Even searching on Instagram, hashtag career change, people will post stories about themselves there. But also challenging dysfunctional beliefs about work in general. So like, you know, if a bunch of people have said, oh, I think you'd really, really like product management, and you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work in tech. Like, okay, what's the dysfunctional belief you have? Like, what's the belief that's keeping you from doing that? Oh, I don't want to work with all white tech boys. Okay, like that's interesting. Like, let's get curious. Let's talk to someone who works in tech and ask them, hey, is that still the vibe? Maybe it is, but this is the data-driven part. Like, I don't want anyone to make decisions about their life without having checked and either validating some of these beliefs or challenging them. So data first. I can't tell you how many lawyers I've worked with that hate being a lawyer. And I'm like, so like, did you talk to a lawyer before you went to law school? Did you like, I don't know, talk to like a parent's friend who's no? Okay, interesting, you know? So don't do that. One last minute question. I've been tracking a job in my industry for 6M on LinkedIn. It's very specific. Oh, 6 months. Thank you. It's very specific and likely few people are truly qualified. Is that a huge red flag? Tracking a job in my, what is tracking a job in your industry? It's been, oh, okay. So the job's been open for 6 months. I don't think that's a red flag. I think that just means that they haven't found the right person for the job. I think red flags you'll know from your like interactions with these people, right? Are they super delayed in getting back to you? Are they kind of rude in the interview process? Like, I think those are more red flags. I think we should challenge that belief about jobs that are posted for a long time. It's not necessarily true. So yeah, have fun challenging your beliefs. I think we're out of time. Is that right? A little bit, maybe.
I had to find my mute button, sorry. Up to you. We have a few more minutes if you'd like. You can stop there. There is one more question too that was right above Samantha's from Tamia.
Oh, sorry, Tamia. Let's see.
Oh, that's okay.
I joined LinkedIn yesterday and you're my first step. I also followed OOTC. Thank you for this opportunity. Where do I go from here? Yeah, I think I sort of answered that already, just in terms of, you know, investigating yourself, trying to investigate what your beliefs are. I'm a huge fan of journaling. So I think the first step is like becoming aware of like where your blocks are, right? And sort of, it can be really icky, I think. It can be really hard to admit that you're doing something that's keeping you stuck, right? So I think that sometimes it's hard to do on your own, but some people are good at it. But I think that there's that part, like, I don't want to do this because of this. Like it's kind of like that attitude. So if you catch yourself doing that, just investigate it, and no judgment, right? Like try not to judge yourself for having that type of a reaction to something. But just the data piece, I can't stress that enough. Like I can't tell you how many people are like, I just chose it because that's the question I always ask people. Oh, well, how did you get into that? And the stories are always so wild. Like, I don't know, like someone offered it to me. I'm like, cool. So just investigate a little bit more. And what else? I was also going to tell you guys today about like career indecisiveness, but I think that that'll take too long. But I think that that's like another area that you can start to explore, is try to figure out like, okay, is this indecision? Because a lot of people just struggle with like, some people struggle with, I have no idea what my options even are. And then other people struggle with like, okay, I have a few options, but I'm absolutely indecisive and I cannot move on, right? So I think the indecisiveness piece is really interesting. Like, is this normal indecisiveness, which is a normal part of the career decision making process? Or where can I show you? Okay. Sometimes this makes people feel bad, but we'll see. Like, is it regular indecision, or is it like I'm like a chronically indecisive person, right? I can't make decisions about anything. And then this is the part that upsets people. If you're a chronically indecisive person, these might be some traits that you might have. And if these are some things that you're struggling with, then I might recommend getting some professional help, because it's going to be hard to unstick yourself if this is sort of like a personality trait. So I think that's another small step you could take, is sort of try to do a self-assessment, like, am I chronically indecisive? Is this keeping me stuck? Do I need extra help? And this cute little guy, he's the opposite. He knew exactly what he wanted, which I thought was so sweet.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. I think that, in the career identity web, that so many of us only focus on one or two of those. So actually seeing it all put together, I think makes some of us focus a little bit more on some other areas to help us make those decisions. So we appreciate that. And we will send out a recording of this as well tonight. And we'll also get the resources that you had mentioned as well too sent out to everybody as well. And if anybody on here, and we'll put this in the chat, Kat, can you put it in the chat for us, the Lifetime 5? If anybody on here is not a user of Out of the Class, we will give you a promo for our digital resource library. So it's usually $27 for lifetime access. And with the Lifetime 5, you can get it today for $22. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you have any questions, email us, send us a chat, whatever you need to do, but we appreciate you all.